and welcome to This Week Explained. I'm Tiana, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kervin. There has been yet another week of global news, which means there's another episode of our humble little podcast with all of the intelligence insights that you're looking for. But first of all, Kervin, you recently had a conversation with Swedish intelligence professor Tony Ingeson. How did that go?
It was absolutely amazing. He's just got...
Of course it was.
Yeah, and he's got so much intelligence knowledge. We do a lot of talking about Soviet intelligence history. He's got a background in Soviet intelligence history. You're not going to want to skip this episode. That's going to come out July 2nd. That's as we're recording. That's this Sunday. But the whole reason I wanted to talk to him is because of his research into using intelligence analysis to defeat cancer.
What?
Yeah, he's got a peer-reviewed paper coming out pretty soon. And that's just really incredible what you can use intelligence analysis for.
Wow, that's incredible. That sounds like a very, very thought-provoking episode. I'm sure you found the perfect clip for us.
Yeah.
So are you ready to play that now?
Yeah, and I won't do what I've done a few times, which is not set the clip up. And then you're just listening to somebody talk and you have no idea.
Yeah,
so,
I noticed that, but I was like, maybe he just is tired.
Well, that's true, too. Two things can be correct at the same time.
Okay. I'm just backing you because,
which I appreciate.
Support.
I love you so much. I don't think we say that on this podcast too much.
We don't at all, but I love you, too.
And so if my wife's listening, stop before this.
Make sure she hits pause. You should warn her.
She doesn't listen to this.
Give her the timestamp and tell her.
Cut that out.
Right.
No, but to set the clip up, I asked him about, how the Swedes are seeing Russia right now and how they feel about Russia's presence along their borders. And so here is the clip from his answer.
Yeah, I think to some extent, I think it doesn't need to be highlighted that much because the threat from Russia is kind of obvious to most people. So you don't have to remind people of it because it's always at the back of people's minds, I think. And it has been for such a long time. I mean, a lot of people forget, but even here, ironically, but for quite a long time, Sweden was a very militarized country. Kind of a bit like Israel in the 60s and 70s during that sense, but not quite, not that far. But we had conscription, which we still do. It was suspended for a while, but it was reintroduced again. We had pretty significant spending on the armed forces. We had a pretty significant Air Force. At one point, our Air Force was, I think, the fourth largest and most capable in the world.
My bulky blender was such a pain to use, I ended up hardly ever using it at all. But the BlendJet 2 portable blender makes blending so easy and convenient, I use it just about every day. BlendJet 2 is portable, so you can blend up a smoothie at work, a protein shake at the gym, or even a margarita on the beach. It's small enough to fit in a cup holder, but powerful enough to blast through tough ingredients like ice and frozen fruit with ease. BlendJet 2 is whisper quiet, so you can make your morning smoothie without waking up the whole house. It lasts for 15 plus blends and recharges quickly via a USB-C cord. Best of all, BlendJet 2 cleans itself. Just blend water with a drop of soap and you're good to go. With over 30 plus colors and patterns to choose from, there's a BlendJet 2 to complement just about any style. I absolutely love the Lisa Frank edition. What are you waiting for? Go to blendjet.com and grab yours today. And be sure to use the promo code Analytics12 to get 12% off your order and free 2-day shipping. No other portable blender on the market comes close to the quality, power, and innovation of BlendJet 2. They guarantee you'll love it or your money back. Blend anytime, anywhere with the BlendJet 2 portable blender. Go to blendjet.com and use the code Analytics12 to get 12% off your order and free 2-day shipping. Shop today and get the best deal ever.
Did you love it?
I couldn't stop smiling, but it's probably because I just love Sweden so much.
Yeah.
But I do want to listen to this episode. It sounds really, really, really interesting. I didn't know that it was possible to perhaps cure cancer with the use of AI. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's gonna. We get into it. I don't know a lot.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm definitely not an oncologist. I have no medical background. So unfortunately, I didn't get to ask, maybe some of the medical questions that
Right.
he asked. But he also wouldn't have been able to answer that because he is a professor of intelligence analysis.
Right.
He says at the beginning he doesn't know that kind of stuff. But yes, it's an incredible episode. I can't wait to share it with everyone.
And then also his background in Soviet intelligence history is also very pertinent to what's going on right now. So
yes,
it's a perfect episode. If you haven't listened to any episode of Insightful Inquiries, it's an excellent episode to get started. Cut your teeth on it.
It's going to be good audio. He's a podcaster as well, so his mic is very good.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, that is awesome. Cannot wait to hear it. July 2nd, guys. Let's get into what is on the agenda this week.
All right, so a little bit different. The rundown's going to be a little different this week.
We're not going to give you an itemized list of what we're going through.
No, because we are still unpacking what happened over the past weekend with what was originally an armed mutiny that turned to a protest. There were some great memes that said, "It's a prank! It's a prank!"
Yeah.
Which was hilarious. But it was very short-lived. Not what happened was hilarious. The memes are hilarious.
Yeah.
So I want to get into all of the speculation. I want to get into who knew what the different geopolitical players are doing, maybe how long this had been planned, all of that stuff, so that we can do a breakdown. We're going to talk like broader geopolitical implications of this armed mutiny, this possible coup, and then how that's going to affect maybe Russian-Chinese relations and Russian-U.S. relations.
All right. Well, where do you want to start?
Let's just start with the quick summary. For those that may have been living under a rock and have no idea what we're talking about, congratulations to you for not knowing, because it was a wild weekend.
It was
for us.
It was fun. I'm not. The stuff that was happening was not fun.
Right.
We had a fun weekend. Sorry.
We did.
I did not.
We were with friends and family over the weekend. And so all of this led to quite a few various theories on what was going on. But let's get into what we were talking about.
Right.
It's the armed mutiny led by Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin. That lasted just about 24 hours before he agreed to stop the march and agreed to go to Belarus. Now, since the beginning, there has always been this infighting between the Wagner Group and Russia's Ministry of Defense, and that's particularly over the war in Ukraine. So you have elite Wagner Group forces, and then you have the Russian Ministry of Defense that doesn't control those forces.
Right.
So the Wagner Group accused the Ministry of Defense of deliberately withholding sufficient ammunition, and then before what happened over the weekend, tensions escalated when a missile strike allegedly hit a Wagner base camp. After that happened, Prigozhin launched what some described as an armed mutiny. He described it as a protest or a march on the city. But during the entire thing, it was clear that this was against the military leadership in Russia, because he did not criticize President Putin throughout the whole thing.
Oh.
He didn't even criticize the Russian government directly. He just marched on Moscow, which seems to me like a criticism.
It seems like he has, some bones to pick.
Right.
I mean, that's what I thought the implication was, but obviously I didn't really, like you, I didn't analyze everything to the point to recognize that he didn't actually criticize President Putin or the Russian government. I didn't make that connection.
Yeah, and aside from it happened, the tragedy, there were a few Russian military members that were killed, but from what I could tell, no civilians were killed or anything like that. So it's reflecting on it, I can say that it was such an interesting time to be with friends and family, and they see the background of how we do things in the company.
Oh, yeah.
And
It was
we got
fun.
a lot of remarks on that of how it was like, oh, that's how this, that's how this is done. It was like, yeah, with a little less alcohol and a little more conversation.
Yeah, less alcohol, less carbs.
Yeah.
There's not usually bowls of pasta.
Oh,
involved.
such great pasta.
But it was
But-
good pasta.
So getting back to what happened after the Wagner group got really close to Moscow, Putin addressed the nation in order to assert his control. He had to show that he's still the leader of Russia. And he did condemn the actions of the Wagner group.
So what is your assessment? Was this a protest or was it, in fact, an attempted coup?
Yeah, so most, I think, are describing it as an attempted coup, but it's not necessarily a traditional coup. Because like I said, Prigozhin was very careful not to criticize President Putin or the Russian government. If you're doing a traditional coup, you're going to go straight for the top.
Right.
Yeah, so in my assessment, and this is not, so Prigozhin he's the boss of the Wagner group. Whatever he says goes. So you think of it like in Russia, what Putin says goes. Same for the Wagner group with Prigozhin. And so what he was most likely attempting to do was topple Russia's military leadership. I mean, he called out various officers within the military, the Minister of Defense, people within the FSB. So it was really just trying to get to that Russian military leadership, not the Kremlin and not Putin. It is important to note that an armed insurrection by a private Russian army, no matter what he says, it does not reflect well on Putin. It's why he had to go on national Russian television and make a public address to the nation over the weekend. He didn't wait until Monday or Tuesday to try that.
So how exactly has President Putin responded to this?
Well, and then we talked about the statement he made. Originally, he called the event a, quote, criminal escapade, quote, unquote that. And then he called it an armed mutiny. And that's what a lot of people are calling it now. That's the last thing Putin called it. He did not directly acknowledge the Wagner Group's actions as a coup attempt. So that's kind of saved some people from a lot of violence. He did emphasize that they do represent a serious threat to Russia's security and sovereignty, and that's why they're in Belarus right now. Now, his original speech, like I said, aimed to project that there's this image of he's in control of the situation. Putin is going to assert his authority as president and commander-in-chief of Russia.
What do you mean his original speech?
The one he made over the weekends, because he made another one on Monday. Yeah.
Okay. So how might this situation affect the war in Ukraine?
Okay, that's it. That's an excellent question. We talked about, if you remember, we talked about this for hours over the weekend.
I remember.
Okay.
Literally last week.
And this was one of the main thoughts we had. How does this affect the Ukrainian counteroffensive? How does this affect the war in Ukraine? What is Ukraine going to do? And initially they decided to stand by and watch this play out. And you and I both kind of thought that was odd. Why would they wait? They really need to try to capitalize on this and go after the Russian military, who's being pulled in all kinds of different directions. But the focus of it, and I've talked about this a lot, that the counteroffensive is not going well right now in Ukraine. And so it was the perfect opportunity to get the counteroffensive in the right direction. But Ukrainian officials, what I think they should have done is viewed the recent events as a distraction and then emphasized the need to stay focused on their military objectives. They didn't do that. They kind of just sat back and waited until, after Prigozhin retreated and left for Belarus. That's not what happened. If I was a military analyst, I would have told them, if I was their military analyst, I would have told them ramp up the counteroffensive, take advantage of any vulnerabilities or disarray within that Russian military.
Okay, well, you mentioned Ukraine took a wait-and-see approach to this whole event, but the United States waited it out as well. Like, why do you think the United States has been cautious in publicly responding to this situation?
Yeah, so there's several reasons that we could talk about as to why they were waiting. One of the things that's different is the U.S. isn't actively engaged in a war with Russia, so they have the ability to wait it out. But officials in D.C. wanted to wait to avoid giving Russian President Vladimir Putin the opportunity to blame Western adversaries for the conflict. So stay out of it so you can't be blamed. The Biden administration and the U.S. is keenly aware that any rhetoric from American officials could be seized upon by Putin, and that would rally Russians and consolidate his power even more. The U.S. is making it clear they had no involvement in the conflict. Everything I'm hearing from sources is while some intelligence analysts believe that they knew this was going to happen at some point, there was no active involvement in the supposed coup. And they're also the administration publicly is emphasizing that this is an internal matter for Russia to deal with.
So has President Joe Biden addressed the situation in Russia at all?
Yeah, he did. He made an address I would say it was either Tuesday or Wednesday on the situation in Russia. He was talking during a press conference, made sure to publicly state that the United States and NATO were not involved in the conflict. He also mentioned he had a video call with allies to ensure that they all share in the goal of not giving Putin any excuse to blame the West or NATO for the uprising.
He doesn't need an excuse. He just doesn't.
And yeah, we'll probably get to that a little bit later. Biden and his administration so far has refrained from providing an immediate assessment of the implications of the Wagner groups, but make no mistake, that conversation is happening within the Pentagon. What are the implications of this, and what should the U.S. response be towards those Wagner group's actions against Russia during the war in Ukraine?
So how do Russian officials perceive the international response to this conflict?
Well, okay, so there's the question that we'll get back to. Through all the best efforts of trying to distance themselves from what's going on in Russia, Russian officials have accused Western intelligence services of potentially being involved in the rebellion.
Right, because we get along so well with the Wagner group.
Yes, that's who we want.
What the heck?
How many times?
Talk about a leap.
How many times did I say, you want to change power in Russia? This is not the guy. Prigozhin's not the guy that you want changing. Now, the CIA has put some very terrible people in power over the years.
Right.
I don't see that this would be the guy they'd hang their hat on. I really don't. But getting back to what Russia is saying, so they're blaming Western intelligence services.
Right.
They've said that they're currently investigating this. It is important to note that the U.S. has been in contact with their Russian counterparts that they can still call, and they're emphasizing that they view the situation as a domestic affair. They're going to wipe their hands clean of it, and this is for Russia to deal with. The U.S. considers themselves to be a bystander.
Okay, well, is there any concern about escalation from Russia, possibly involving those lovely nuclear weapons that are in Belarus?
Right. So now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of the conversation.
Okay. I want meat and potatoes.
Yeah, I can't wait for some meat and potatoes.
Yeah, we're having meat and potatoes for dinner tonight, y'all.
Don't record when you haven't eaten.
Yeah. You know what? I don't know if I have.
Recorded before you've eaten?
No, I don't know if I've eaten.
Oh.
I mean, I've eaten some stuff. I've grazed. I've done my infamous grazing technique, which is terrible, but I just...
Well, you're going to get the questions from your husband, so get ready for that.
Okay. I don't care about that guy.
Okay. So, now, like I said, we're getting into this. There's always a concern about escalation when we discuss Putin, right? That's just one of the guys, like a Kim Jong-un, that's like, you going to talk about him? We're going to talk about escalation. This is particularly given recent references made by Putin to Russia's nuclear weapons arsenal. But officials in the U.S. and NATO have consistently emphasized the importance of not allowing the war in Ukraine to escalate that far. They believe that it's not in the interest of Ukraine, European allies, or even the Russian people for the conflict to escalate beyond the current level of violence we see today.
It's not in the best interest of the Russian people for any conflict at all to be occurring. Or the Ukrainian people. I don't what a weird thing to say. Anyways, so Does this event and Prigozhin's move to Belarus change the probability of Putin using nuclear weapons in Ukraine? Or, like, what's happening?
Yes, I guess that would be the real question on everybody's mind. And it's on your mind, too. I can say at this point, I haven't increased my probability. And in talking to people, I have been told my probability is pretty high. I have it at 50-50. And for me, this doesn't increase it. What we do have is a very interesting turn of events. So a lot of talk from experts is about how Prigozhin was banished to Belarus. And I do think that that's an improper terminology. I don't think he was banished. My assessment is that Prigozhin, with the help of Putin, could be positioning himself to overthrow the government in Belarus. And that would be if Lukashenko finds himself on the outs with Putin and the Russian government. Now, we all know, we talked about it, tactical nuclear weapons officially arrived in Belarus this month, in the month of June. But if Putin gives the call, Lukashenko is going to need to sign off on its usage, right? So if he says no response from Lukashenko means Prigozhin steps in. So does it change my assessment on tactical nuclear weapon usage? No, not necessarily. It changes my assessment of the multiple avenues that Putin can now go through in order to call for a strike on Ukraine from Belarus. Now he's got multiple people that he can force to do that. I also still don't see the timeline moving up. Some people would ask, do you think he'll do it before the elections in 2024? That would be a gross miscalculation from Putin. Now, it's also a miscalculation, in my opinion, that they carried out a full-on invasion of Ukraine. But that was already one miscalculation. I don't see him making quite that drastic of another miscalculation. But anything?
Saying the word miscalculation.
I'll use it again before we right at the end.
Oh my gosh!
But what I was saying is
that sentence just had that word like 5 times.
That's what happens when you have calculation on the brain,
or miscalculation.
Right. Which I miscalculated by saying that.
So I'm not married to you.
But what I was trying to get at is anything is possible, right? And anything's possible. I don't see it as probable right now.
Okay, well then let's just talk about Putin and where he stands as the leader of Russia. Did this event change his hold on power within Russia, or do you think he's still as untouchable as the president of Russia?
Yeah, Putin continues to be the number one man in Russia, even with this armed mutiny. First of all, because now Prigozhin says it was just a protest or a prank.
Right.
I like to call it a prank. So I see that Putin still remains strong as the leader in Russia. I will say if he wanted Prigozhin dead, he'd be dead right now.
It's got this weird, there's this weird feeling that this whole thing is just plotted.
Yeah.
To make it seem like Putin's weaker than he actually is, but really he was just trying to install Prigozhin into Belarus, because whenever we noticed they were starting to align themselves, Belarus and Russia, you called it from the get-go, and you said, obviously he was going to align himself with leaders that he perceives almost to be, I don't know if this is the correct choice of words, but weaker than him, so that he can strong-arm them into doing what he wants. And then it seems like Prigozhin being in Belarus is more like an insurance policy for him to keep Lukashenko in line.
Yes,
feels like that's the vibe I'm getting from it. But that's just me speculating.
That's totally my analysis of what went on, and I'm still trying to unpack a lot
of everything.
Proof,
so this is us just saying things, just making assumptions. Okay.
Exactly. No proof, opinions, analysis.
We're saying that to our listeners too, because we know sometimes our opinions overlap with the actual analysis, and this is just us speculating. We don't have any proof of it. And this is how off the mouth.
This is how intelligence analysis works. Honestly, you have a bunch of information. You talk through with a couple of people that you trust and you respect, and you get conclusions from that. And we came up with some confusion and conclusions over the weekend. But yeah, this was my main assessment of the situation.
Okay.
And there's tons of reasons behind it. Belarus's proximity to Poland, Belarus has the tactical nuclear weapons. Belarus is the perfect spot to distract everybody in Ukraine from the Russian forces and move into Kiev, which is oh my goodness, I'm a little tired.
Pew.
Everybody,
You do sound exhausted today.
yeah, it's been quite a week. But Putin wants Kiev. He wants Ukraine back completely under Russia, and that starts with Kiev. So here's how I feel about it. Putin views Prigozhin and the Wagner forces as a necessary evil in all of these conflicts that Russia has inserted themselves into.
Okay.
If we want to do the rundown, we've got Africa, Syria, Ukraine. Wagner forces are in all of those places. Now they head to Belarus to re-engage with Ukraine, and they could possibly be used, like I was talking about in Poland, as an early assault into Poland. This is because there's a base in Belarus that is getting established, and once that's fully established, they could hold more forces and send it through Poland. So while a lot of the talk around this mutiny is about how it hurt Putin, I'm viewing the actual swiftness with which it was stopped through, let's put up quotes again, quote unquote, negotiations with Prigozhin. That is
so fast.
Yeah, that's why I say it solidified Putin's leadership within Russia.
Mm-hmm.
You don't start this and then in 24 hours say, yeah, I'm going to go to Belarus unless...
I'm serious.
Right.
Just a Josh.
Because of how they were moving through Moscow. Yeah, they were into Moscow, I should say, not through Moscow. But they got dangerously close to Moscow before Prigozhin agreed to move to Belarus. In saying all this, listen, I know I'm in the minority in this. A lot of people are saying that Putin's done. He's not going to be president anymore. But he needed a big win before the 2024 election. And while a lot of people are looking at this as a loss, this may have handed him that big win with the Russian people. Because we got to focus away from how we feel about Putin.
Yeah. And we don't know how they're framing it there.
Exactly. Well, yeah, you can go through the Russian media and see how they're talking about it. But until you talk to the people on the ground, you just don't know how they're feeling.
Exactly.
So I consider this a big win because it's all in how Putin frames the narrative. Now he can claim that he defeated an armed insurrection from within Russia.
After about 24 hours, so...
Yeah, quick.
Yes.
Boom.
But you also mentioned, quote, base in Belarus. What's going on with that?
And that's, okay. This is why I love to have you on here all the time, because I just start going off as if everyone's caught up on these world events, and no one has that kind of bandwidth. Nobody, not even me. And I miss so many things. So to have you come back and just let me refocus to let everybody know.
Answer the question, Mr. O'Quinn.
Okay, so a little background on that. This week, some new satellite images surfaced that suggested that the Wagner Group is constructing a new base in Belarus. That base is about 90 kilometers from Minsk. The president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, did admit that he granted permission for Wagner forces to operate in the country and set up that base. I can also say that Putin did give members of the group 3 options. They can either move to Belarus, which is what the majority are doing to go to that base. They can join the Russian military. Some are doing that to keep fighting in Ukraine. Or they can return home. That's not really a choice because they're going to be killed if they go home.
Right.
So you really got 2 choices. And if you go to the Russian military, you still may be killed.
Yeah.
Now, the implications of this new base in Belarus that I think said could hold up to 70,000 people. I think it starts at 25,000, and when it's completely full, it'll be about 70,000 Wagner Group forces. It's a very significant implication in the conflict in Ukraine. And if it escalates any further, then we're talking about those fears of nuclear weapon use.
So let's shift this conversation to Russia's allies. How are China and its leadership reacting to this really surreal situation in Russia?
Yeah, and it's been a bit disconcerting to the Chinese leadership. China values their partnership with Russia. It sees them as a close major partner, particularly in disputes with the United States and the West. But in the conflict in Russia, this one that happened with the Wagner forces, along with those international sanctions that have been imposed on Russia, all that's putting a strain on their resources, on the Chinese resources and the Russian resources. China is likely considering its next steps right now and the impact on their relationship with Russia. They support Putin in the war in Ukraine, but that support has exposed them to potential risks. This chaos in Russia could significantly disrupt their trade relations. The economy is a big part of this. Now, withdrawing support from the alliance, from that alliance with China and Russia, would also mean risking losing too much for China. So despite those concerns about the situation in Russia, China is publicly downplaying the crisis. So that's to answer your question on how China feels publicly. They're downplaying it. They're emphasizing the long-term strategic alliance between the two countries. China's partnership with Russia, especially since Putin took over, is crucial for their global strategic ambitions, China's global strategic ambitions. And that's particularly with their confrontation towards the West, in the U.S. Chinese President Xi has invested significant political capital in his relationship with Putin, and he views Russia as his most significant partner.
Earlier, you said that Putin's stronghold has not been weakened at all. So let's say that this does weaken his power, and maybe it shows at the polls in the 2024 election. What then for China?
Okay, so if Putin's grip on power is weakened and chaos consumes Russia, then Xi faces a very difficult choice. He could step in to stabilize the regime and support Putin. That's going to risk Western nations severing economic ties completely with China. China does have some good relations with Western Europe, as well as some trade relations with New Zealand. That would all be gone. There are some indications that Xi may not offer unconditional support to Putin. China's also shown a reluctance in publicly providing military support to Russia, although we're seeing some open source reporting that they are privately giving those weapons to Russia.
A lot like what the U.S. does.
Leave it to Tiana. Yes,
Hey,
it is very much.
You got to call everybody out,
Call a spade, yes. Do we always choose the right people to...
No.
Yeah, there you go. I'm not going to defend that, and I'm not going to argue that. This is not a debate; it's a fact.
All right, let's just move on then. Move on.
But that's about as aggressive as it gets on this podcast. We agree.
We agree. We're on the same page.
Yeah. Well, so I said, they are not publicly stating that they're providing military support to Russia. They've also delayed finalizing a gas pipeline deal that would provide economic relief to Russia. Now, in the end, Xi's likely to prioritize what's best for Beijing. I mean, that's just what he's going to do.
Obviously.
That's what he wants. That's where he gets his power from. And that's going to be regardless of the events in Moscow. So if supporting Putin's regime poses significant risks to China, Xi is going to be hesitant to go out of his way to provide support for Putin.
All right. Well, thank you for those insights on this situation. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah, before we go, the events over the weekend showed all of us that understanding geopolitical implications of a major event like this does not happen immediately. It happens. You have you have the conversations. Those conversations lead to debates between analysts and experts. I put us in that. Yes, I'm not going to shy away from that. It's what we did over the weekend with people like Ricky from Rickonomics, with Chad. And it was really refreshing to get everyone's opinion. Everyone had a different opinion on things. And we all got to express those views and let that guide how we view the event.
We beat them down because they didn't agree with us at all.
With pasta.
Well, no, we didn't give... we made chatty dumplings when we didn't agree.
Chad never had dim sum. And he did.
Never had dim sum. Dim sum. I apologize.
Oh, he's had dumb sum, I'll tell you that. But what I want to say is that it's important to continue monitoring the situation in Russia and in Ukraine as these events unfold. Don't stop following them, but have the conversations. The exact implications of this uprising remain uncertain. We're almost a week into it. It's going to be crucial to assess the fallout. That fallout's going to help us decide what's going to happen in the future and the potential long-term effects on both countries, Russia and Ukraine. We got two different populations that are affected by this. And then couple that with these countries' relationships with other nations around the globe.
Speaking of conversations and debates, you were pretty outspoken when we were discussing this about this weekend and at the beginning of this podcast about how this could be a maneuver to position Prigozhin as the next leader of Belarus. Do you still believe this is true, or was that just an early assessment without much information to back it up?
So, I said this to you before we started, or maybe was it on the podcast that I said
I think it was because I said you were tired, and you said because you were stumbling all over your words, and I was like, you're tired, and I wanted to support you, and you're like, two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah, you try to support me, and I slap back and don't accept the support, and I apologize for that.
What the heck are you talking about? Everyone's gonna be like, Tiana is done with him today.
That's how Josh and Jacob feel all the time. You are done.
All right.
But I said this to you and Ricky, I think, was there at the same time, that I thought Prigozhin was going to take over. I thought he was getting ready to fully take over Belarus. And I had no information to prove my theory. I was just watching things unfold. Prigozhin was in Belarus. Lukashenko, they had said, left Belarus to go somewhere else. It was just like the perfect action to then now do a coup in Belarus. Now, that didn't happen, but I was looking at it from an analytical standpoint as the news was coming out. If you watch the videos of him leaving Russia, he's surrounded by thousands of people. I don't know if you saw those videos. So he's in a bulletproof vehicle getting ready to go to Belarus, and there are thousands of people. They are risking everything just to shake his hand, to tell him how much they love him and thank him for everything that he does. He has a ton of support in certain pockets around Russia. We've discussed that before. We've discussed that he has political ambitions. He really does. And wouldn't it be the perfect fit for Putin to save his own presidency by installing his biggest competition into another country? And it's also someone that, say what you will, he does support Putin. He really does support Putin as the leader of Russia. And then he would be put in as the leader of Russia's de facto state that would then now be absorbed by Russia, and that's Belarus. And let's just not kid ourselves. Belarus is just an extension of Russia. If Lukashenko makes a misstep against Putin, he's going to suffer the consequences in the form of a Wagner-led coup on the country of Belarus. This happens, I do think that we have reached the most dangerous point in the war in Ukraine.
One might say he also miscalculated.
Oh, you beat me to it.
Were you going to say that?
I was going to say it at the end.
Oh, well, dang. Well, there's still time. There is still time. Is there anything else that you want to discuss?
All right, one last thing. There were other geopolitical stories that we could have gotten into. Mm-hmm. Sweden allowed the Quran burning again.
Yikes.
That's going to affect their NATO membership plans. I just thought that what happened between Wagner and Russia there's so much nuance that we needed to spend this whole episode talking about it.
It's fine. It was scary for a little while.
It really was.
I mean, it was kind of tense for a little bit when we didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, no, had zero idea. We were just on phones watching news and trying to get to sources and stuff.
Eating burgers.
Well, that's true too. We were eating burgers. Delicious burgers. I just remember
that because the restaurant had a bunch of TVs up, and every single one of them had scary images flashing across the screen showing, the not the coup. What did they decide to call it again?
The protest. Mutiny. Or the armed mutiny.
Okay, well, armed mutiny protest. They were showing, different images of that. It was scary.
Yeah. Yes. That was an intense time, and we were just walking from spot to spot trying to get more information. But I do hope everyone listening has gained something from the conversation that you and I are having. But that's all I've got for this week, unless you want to talk about anything.
Did you finish
Yeah,
talking about everything you wanted to say?
that was it.
Well,
Yep. Just want to see if you want to.
No, I've got some New York strip steaks that I need to go cook in a cast iron. Did you go?
No, I said,
Oh, it's not like okay. Feel free to just eat the mashed potatoes, buddy.
Well, I'm going to have meat and potatoes, please.
Oh, you're gonna have meat and potatoes, and I'm sorry, there's going to be a vegetable involved too. But anyways, I have nothing. It's Brussels sprouts. You'll be fine.
I know. I'm going to love it.
Okay. So, anyways, thank you to our listeners for listening to our humble little independent geopolitical podcast. We hope that you found it both informative and engaging. If you have any feedback or suggestions for future episodes, please let us know. And if you would like in-depth coverage of these stories and more, follow us on Instagram at oakwoodanalytics.com.
Tiana,
That was our website.
that was our website. You can do that too.
But we're still working on fixing that. But I would go on Oakwood Analytics.
Yes,
Instagram.
on the Instagram.
Yes.
Yeah, an update on the website. Just a few more tweaks.
Yeah.
Probably got a couple more months to get everything perfect.
Yeah.
And it is going to be, we could do this at the end here. It's going to be a complete change from what we started out doing. And we have a lot of incredible things to show everybody.
So cool that we can't talk about yet, but
Yes.
it's cool. It's cool, guys. Believe me.
And so, Tiana, thank you so much. Till next week, quit miscalculating and stay safe out there.